Hi everybody, it's Geordie from Geordie's Cards. Thank you so much for joining me today. I decided to enter a card into the MFT 2022 Card Design Superstar competition, and this is the card that I came up with. So the products I'm using today are the Secret Santa stamp set. I've had this one for a little while and I really like it. And then I'm using the Blueprints 29 Dienamics. Again, this is one that I've had for a long time. I'm just using that stitched rectangle from the Dienamics, and I've cut that from my Transotype Perfect colouring paper. This is the paper that I use all the time for colouring on with my Copics. It's not paper really, it's a cardstock, although it's probably about an £80 cardstock. And I'm using this because obviously I'm going to be Copic colouring on this. So I wanted to lay out my stamps. I'm using the one with the Christmas tree and the Santa hiding behind it, and then the little girl. Now the little girl is going to be on the front. So I laid out my stamps to kind of roughly where I wanted them. And I'm stamping my little girl out first. She's peering into her stocking, hoping to find some Christmas goodies on Christmas morning. And once I've stamped her, I am going to go ahead and do some fussy cutting of a mask. So I've got a piece of full stick post-it note tape here. I'm stamping the image down again on that, and I'm going to take my scissors and go ahead and cut all around that. Once that was done, I put my mask in place, and this is where I realized that I managed to cut off one of her little slippers. But luckily I had the little piece left, so I just quickly trimmed around it with my scissors and stuck it on using my tweezers to help me get it in the right spot. I don't know how I missed that. I think I was just so absorbed in the cutting that I wasn't really looking at what I was doing. So never mind, easily fixed. I'm going to add that little bit on there. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take the other stamp that I'm using, which is the Christmas tree with Santa peeking from behind it. And I'm going to place that on where I want it. Now, I want the little girl to be in the foreground, which is why I stamped her first. And I want her to be kind of a little bit forward of the Christmas tree, if that makes sense. So her feet aren't going to line up completely with the base of the Christmas tree or the mat that the Christmas tree is on. I want it to look like she's more in the foreground, so I've put her slightly more forward. But once I was happy with the position, again, I'm stamping that out with some black ink. This is Copic friendly ink. I'll stamp it out a couple of times to get a nice crisp impression. And once that is done, I will again go ahead and mask this off. So I have some masking paper here. My full stick post-it wasn't big enough for this image, so luckily I had some masking paper in my stash. It's really hard to get the backing off it though. It's got this plastic backing on it. It's well stuck down, so I'm carefully peeling that off to make sure I don't rip any of the little pieces, trying to make sure that I've got everything okay and in place. And once that is off with some difficulty, I will go ahead and place that down. Now the key to masking is just that you want to kind of cut along the black lines of the stamp, and then when you place your mask down, just to try and make sure that it fits in nicely. So you can see my head poking in here and making sure that I've got it right masked up nicely so that all of my pieces are covering the stamped image where I'm going to be doing my colouring. So it's a little bit fiddly, particularly with a bigger image like this Christmas tree, but it's fine, it's not too bad, and once I get it in place, we're ready to go. So I'm taking that over to my Make Art station, and I have some Spun Sugar Distress Oxide ink, and I am just going to go, this is a fairly light colour, so I'm just going fairly light-handed, but starting on the actual mask and then blending off it onto the cardstock. Now this cardstock is, as I say, Transotype Perfect colouring paper. It's not the cardstock that I would normally ink blend with, so it is a little bit trickier to get a nice smooth blend, but I just keep going at it and it works out fine. So I'm just kind of concentrating the colour around the edge of my images and then blending out to a light and then pretty much nothing around the edges. So I just want to give it a little bit of a halo of colour around the outside. So I'm kind of going back and forth and laying in a little bit more colour where I feel it needs it, and then trying to blend it out so that it kind of fades off into nothing. and just going back and forth a few times just to make sure that I've got this exactly how I want it. Once I take that mask off, it's kind of no going back. I mean, you could put the mask back on, but it's a little bit fiddly, and sometimes the masks rip. So it's best to make sure you've got it right first time, if that makes sense. So once I'm happy with that, I will go ahead and remove the mask. And I did rip my mask in a couple of little places, but I managed to salvage most of it. I like to try and keep my masks. They're good for a couple of uses. So once you've gone to the trouble of fussy cutting everything out, it's always good to keep them. And all I do is I pop them on top of my stamp and keep it that way so that it's there for next time. So you can see I'm just going to pop it down on top there, and then I've got it for next time. So I'll do the same with the little girl, peel her up, and the little piece of slipper that I left on there. And there we go. It's kind of fun revealing that mask. So once I have those masks removed, it's time to do some colouring. If you want to skip ahead over this colouring, move up to 10 minutes and 52 seconds and you'll get past it all. I wanted to leave it in. I'm literally just leaving in the Christmas tree. I didn't show any of the other colouring that I did, just the Christmas tree, because I often get asked how I colour my trees and my larger images. So I thought I'd leave this one in here today, and otherwise my video would have been really short because it's a very simple card. So all I'm doing is laying down my darkest marker, then my mid-tone, then my lightest. You will see here I had a bit of a mishap with my mid-tone marker, which is my BG75. I got a big splodge of colour right here. It was really juicy and it all leaked out. So I am going to equalise my pen by taking off both caps. And when I use it, I will use it with both caps removed from now on. And what I'll do to get rid of that big splodge of colour is just go in with my colourless blender and dab it out, kind of just literally dab the colourless blender onto that splodge so it kind of seeps through to the back of the card and out onto the scrap piece of cardstock that I'm pulling in here. So that's my little trick if I ever kind of get something like that happen. I'm not going to start again. I've already done all my ink blending and my masking, so I am going to work with this. I'm going to be colouring my baubles in red anyway, so they're going to be fairly dark. So I wasn't too worried about it. I knew that I would be able to work with that. So, and as long as I go back in, and I will go back in a second time with that colourless blender, and again, just push that colour back through. So I am entering this card into the MFT Card Design Superstar competition. Now, I am not going in with any high hopes. There are 3 categories to choose from. There's the Box Card Master, the Colouring Virtuoso, and the Clean and Simple Genius. Now, I don't have any of the box card dies from MFT, so I couldn't enter that competition. I've said on here time and time again that I am no colouring master, so the colouring virtuoso section seemed a little out of my league, so I settled on the Clean and Simple Genius card. Again, I'm not really one for clean and simple cards, so this was a bit of a struggle for me today, but I thought it was, it was worth a try, and if you don't enter, you're never going to win, so I thought I might as well have a try and see how I got on. As I say, I'm not very hopeful, but it's worth having a go, and I really enjoyed making this one today and had a lot of fun doing it. If you are interested in entering, you can check out MFT Stamps blog. I think all the information is on there. The competition is only open until Sunday, the 6th, so you've only got a couple of days left to enter, but it's worth it because there are 15 winners, 5 from each of the 3 categories, and they get a $250 MFT shopping spree, so it's definitely worth your while to check out and have a go at, because if you don't try, you're never going to win. Okay, so back to my colouring. I'm nearly finished here. I'm just literally finishing off the last lower branches. So what I've done is I've added some darker marker towards the kind of top of each branch section and then blended out mid-tone to lightest on each piece. So I've got my lightest pieces kind of towards the bottom and my darkest pieces where they'd be overshadowed by the top layer, if that makes sense. Once that's done, I do go back a few times with this colourless blender to keep trying to push that excess colour out of that bauble where that big splodge happened. And now I'm just taking my markers and going through each of them and using a flicking motion just to flick some colour on. This just adds lots of nice texture to my Christmas tree, and it kind of makes it look a little bit more finished. And I just like the way that it looks. It gives that kind of look of fir or pine branches that you would see. So I'm doing that with all three colours, just quickly flicking on through each section and kind of following the line of the stamp so that my flick motions go in the right direction. And yeah, it's just a little extra to do. I was going to say extra then, extra to add to your tree, and it just makes it look a little bit more polished and finished. But as always, I feel like everything looks so much better once it's had some gel pen details added on top. So once I've finished all of my colouring, I do go ahead and add some gel pen details to everything, including my tree. And here you go, you can see my finished coloured card all ready to go. So what I'm going to do now is bring out my stamping platform, and I'm going to place a sentiment on the bottom of my card. So I'm pulling that same stamp set out. This one says "Have a Magical Christmas," and I'm going to pop it into the bottom part there of my card. And I'm just going to stamp it out with some black ink. I'm really taking some time to make sure it's nicely centered up, because as this is a clean and simple card, the little details really matter. So making sure things are centered and stamped down nicely and crisply, all of those things kind of matter a lot more on a clean and simple card, because you know, you don't have the kind of extra stuff to hide any little mistakes, if that makes sense. So once I'm happy with that, I've got a standard sized 5.5 by 4.25 card base just from some white cardstock, and I'm going to use some foam tape on my panel and lay it on. And now this always terrifies me because I feel like I'm never going to get it in the right spot. And in the end, I kind of end up lifting this up, adding some, I was kind of thinking, how could I do it? I was going to add the tape back on, and then I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just add some liquid glue. So I started out by putting the tape strips back on, then I said, no, if I put some liquid glue on, I might have a little bit of wiggle room to make sure everything's centered and in the right spot. So I did do that, just added a bit of liquid glue onto the back and tried to get this centered down nicely. I struggle with this every single time, but I think I did okay today. I think I got it in the right spot. So that is it. That is my card done and complete. Clean and simple. I did go ahead and add some glossy accents to the baubles just to make them kind of brighten and pop, but that was it. I hope you enjoyed this one today. Let me know if you're joining into the Cards Superstar Challenge as well. Do give me a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel. I'd love to see you come back again. Thank you. Bye.